Welcome to another episode, another iteration of the Prolific Super Producer Podcast. My name is Tyson. Here with me, we also have our other host, Nathan, and we're going to be talking about how to produce more songs in less time at a pro level, part 2. So last week, we talked about the basics of outsourcing, why you should do it, why you should not do it in certain instances. Today, we're going to get super practical for you. We're going to be talking about the do's, don'ts, and also other financial aspects of outsourcing. If you're struggling to get that industry standard quality for your mixes, then go ahead and check out my book, The Objective Mix. It teaches you the objective standards of how to get an industry standard quality mix. There's a link in the description if you are interested in that. Back to our discussion today, how we produce more songs in less time at a pro level, part 2. And we're going to be talking about how to outsource. Diving straight in, what should you do when you're outsourcing? So say I am trying to find a mixing engineer for my latest project. Wrote the song, I produced the song, I recorded the song. Now I want somebody else to actually mix it because I'm just too close to it. I don't think I'm going to be able to produce a very good mix because I'm not objective. So what do I do? Where do I start? How do I approach this, Nathan?
Let's do this. We're going to get super, super deep in this episode. I'm pumped about this. Okay, and so this is kind of fresh, very fresh for me too right now because I have just recently gone through this process of literally doing what we're going to tell you, which is outsourcing specific parts of my workflow. And so this is really fresh. I'm excited to share kind of just like what I was aware of and what I was trying to make sure was clear. And I think that's the first thing when you're going about this, right? All right, how do I outsource? A part of the to-dos list, like, yes, this is cool, set expectations. Set expectations, okay? And for yourself and for who you're reaching out to. So, right, for yourself, like just because if you want to, let's say you want to outsource mixing, maybe mixing and mastering, right? That's where I started. I knew that, okay, I don't have the money, the budget to be able to pay $500 to $1,000 per combined mix and master or whatever. Like, I'm not going to do that, right? So, like, set expectations. Okay, do I have a budget? What ballpark am I looking for? And then you have to adjust those expectations based on that. So, for me, just to be straight up, I intentionally did not want to go with a super established mixing, mastering engineer. I was actually, maybe this sounds a little wild, like I was looking for someone younger than me, someone who's greener than me, someone who doesn't have a lot of experience but is a good person and has a good gut, like has good instincts, and someone who like you could tell over time that they're going to be really, really dope. You know what I mean? They have it right now, but they're just still in process, you know? Why did I do that? One, because I think that's cool to establish a relationship with someone like that. You know, I think that's fun. But then also, those kind of people typically are they're willing to take anything to be able to just work because they love the work. They just love the mixing and mastering. They love getting in there. They love having a new vocal to put, plugins on. They love having a new drum sound to mess with. Like, they just are about it. And so I was looking for someone who would be able to work within my budget, which is a low budget, but they're okay with it because, hey, they're just super self-aware. Like, they're just starting. They rock with me. They rock with my music. They're pumped to be a part of this and just pumped to have something new to work on for them to get better, you know? So set your expectations. What are you looking for? Hey, maybe you're listening and you're like, no, I got the 500 or what. You can go for it. Okay, well, then you're going to be reaching upward, right? You're going to be looking for someone who, has, way more experience than you and who is like honing the specific craft, right? That's going to change the way that you do this outreach stuff that we're going to talk about. But also be real with yourself too about, how you're going to go about this. And then when you get in conversations with people, when you're starting to reach out, which do not worry, please listen to the end very shortly where you have a like literal template of like step 1, step 2, step 3 that we're going to walk you through to do this. But it all starts with your expectations. Don't just... Man, the biggest advice I could get is I want to outsource mixing, and you just do a quick search or something, and you just reach out to the first person that you find just because they have mixing engineer in their Instagram bio. Like that I'm sorry, that doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? Like anyone could put anything in their Instagram bio. You kind of have to have a little bit of thought, a little bit of strategy before starting to do all this stuff. So set your expectations with yourself. What are you looking for? What's your budget? And let that inform how then you're going to do the actual outsourcing, the actual reaching out to people. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, Tyson, just kind of right off the bat. Like,
Yeah.
to-dos with outsourcing?
So a couple of things is the very first one is if you just like go in and like, I want a mastering engineer. So you just Google mastering engineer. You're going to get results and they might actually be really legit mastering engineers, but you're probably going to overpay for it because they have the ability to do that because what does everybody else do when they want a mastering engineer? They go to Google and they type in mastering engineer. So there's a lot of like competition for that. And that competition then makes it really expensive for those businesses that are able to, or those mastering engineers that are able to get those, first 10 slots or whatever in Google. So just recognize that you're probably going to overpay if you go down that route. Not to say that you can't get great results. Like those mastering engineers are probably completely legitimate and will give you a great sound for your song, but they may not be necessarily the best fit for you financially wise. So if you're looking to go down this route that Nathan kind of mentioned of, find somebody who's still younger, a little bit greener, who, still has the skills, but they don't have the reputation to match those skills yet, right? That's kind of the key. Another thing too is that why I like this approach sometimes is because established mastering engineers, established mixing engineers sometimes don't like music. And this seems really weird. I feel like as a mastering engineer, I've somehow like built up a bigger network than most people in the music industry, quicker than most. I shouldn't say I've bigger than most. I should say I developed it quicker than most because, I work with a lot of other projects, a lot of engineers. I know a lot of other mastering engineers. And it's so funny because you hear this story so often of somebody's like really passionate about music. They dive in, they create a studio, and then they, have a really tough go for about 4 to 5 years. And then they finally like reach that point where they're like stable enough to survive. And so they end up surviving for the long term. And then 20 years later, they have this studio that's marginally successful, but they hate their clients. They hate the music that they produce. They just listen and are so ingrained in this music all the time that they don't listen to music outside of work because they just are jaded at a certain point. And so it's one of those things that's like you don't really think about when you first get into music, especially as like a producer, mixing or mastering engineer. Like on the service side, right? People who you're trying to get to outsource to you, right? That's the other side that you just like don't always recognize like what's going on, and then you end up having just like this jaded aspect of yourself towards the music, towards your clients. Like I've heard this just so often that people just don't like their clients anymore. So anyway, all that to say, some of the more established engineers may not actually be as passionate about it, and they won't go above and beyond for your music because they just don't care, frankly. And so that's a really better a lot of times to find those people who are just green, are still coming up, still super on fire about over delivering to set a reputation for themselves, and also over deliver on the actual product because they still love the process. And not I don't want to say that anybody who's been in the music industry for a really long time, some of them are still awesome people. They still love music and they still, are going to go above and beyond because they do love the process. But I'm just warning you that is not everybody. And it's a relatively common thing in the industry to end up in that situation. So that being said, the other thing that was the other thing I wanted to mention. So
I think that's really
the other
good.
Do that we wanted to mention here is start small. Don't dive in on and I've run into this a lot of somebody is a new artist and they're like, I have an entire album. And then they go to the first producer because they know them from church. And they're like, can you produce my music? I have an entire album. Like I tried to do this when I was in like my high school band, right?
Yeah.
It's just natural. Like you see your favorite bands producing albums. And you're like, I want to do an album. That's your goal. And so then you approach your producer and it's the only producer you know probably. And then you say, hey, I want to do this. And they're like, okay, yeah, sure. I'm going to take your money and we're going to do this thing. But because you didn't start small, you decided to bite off an entire album. A number of things could happen. One, they're terrible to work with and you didn't know that beforehand. And then you just end up in this miserable, super long project because an album is a big commitment. And you end up working with them for hundreds of hours and you honestly just hate working with them. So it's just not a very pleasant experience. Even if the end result is good, it's it wasn't really the experience you were going for, and you're always going to have this like kind of bad feeling in relation to that album and that music, which you don't want that about your own music, right? You want to have great experiences of having recorded that and, you know, been part of the production process that you want to remember from doing that project. The other
100%.
side, the other scenario that could come out with, they're really nice, you love working with them, but the end product is terrible. Then you shot yourself in the foot. You spent thousands of dollars producing something that then is terrible. I did this back in the day because I hired a producer to produce my project. The production was fine, but then I hired him to mix and master it. Did not work out very well. So
like, what happened?
Ultimately, I was ashamed of the project. I did put it out there, and then a few years later, I took it back down because I'm like, this isn't good. It got like 6 streams, and I know why. I know what hamstrung the project. 2 things, actually. It was my songwriting, too. My songwriting was not very good. And also the actual production, too. Like, it really held me back. I was like 21, so, I mean, I just wasn't a very good writer back then. Anyway.
Come on.
That being said, so those are like kind of the nightmare scenarios that you could find yourself with. And so when you are starting to work with anybody, whether even if it's just like a mixing engineer or just a mastering engineer, do one song.
Yeah.
Start as small as possible to just get a taste of what they can do. And set that expectation. You say, hey, like, I want to use you to mix my song, but we're going to start with one song to see how it goes. If it goes well, then I have, 4 others that I'm ready to move forward with, but I just want to start small.
Yes.
Nobody's going to say no to that. Some people will actually do a test project for you. So, for example, if you reached out to me for mastering, as of right now, I will do a test master for you. And then I will show you exactly what I can do for your song, and then you can decide, do I want to move forward or not? If you want to move forward, then we can do revisions and all of that stuff. But it gives you a taste, right? It's kind of like that drug dealer mentality of, I'm just going to give them one hit for free, and then you have to come back to your drug dealer to get more drugs, right? Yeah, you want to get people hooked in, and so most providers, mixing, mastering engineers, are willing to do that because they want to give you that first hit of the good, high quality stuff, right?
Yes.
And from your perspective, it's just a low barrier to entry of, okay, I'm going to try this outsourcing thing, see if it works out well. And I didn't waste a bunch of money. Even if I do end up paying for, one mix, it was far better to pay $200 for a mix than $2,000 to mix my entire album. And then the whole project turns out poor. So any thoughts to add there, Nathan?
Yeah, totally. I think that this particular step to start with test projects and to start small is also doing a lot more for you than obviously we want to make sure that the expertise, the technicality, like the ability to produce a quality product is there, but you're actually learning a lot of other things too. You're getting a lot of helpful data from this person that's, that you're approaching. So for me, like when I was reaching out for my mixing mastering engineer, right? Like for this person, I'm reaching out and I actually just as like straight up, I let him mix half of one of my songs. So I got the stems, right? And I just cut it right after the first chorus. So it's such a low barrier to entry. It's not overwhelming. And it's like, if he's really pumped about it, he'll do it. And if he's not, he won't. It's like just to make it super easy for him to do. And the other part about doing this test project stuff is you're going to learn, again, not just about their skill level, which obviously is super duper important, but for me, other important factors are how kind are they? Are they a good person? Do they care about music? Do they share the same passion that you have? Another thing I am looking for is timeline. So this is kind of why I like something like, messaging or, direct messaging, whatever platform you're going to do that on, is because you can see when you sent a message and then you can see when they respond back with the finished product. So like you can see how quickly they're turning things around. You can get a lot of what am I trying to say? You can get the vibe, so to speak, of what it would be like to potentially work with this person. And I just believe that anyone worth their salt who's really gung-ho about it, like they're going to do their very best for you. They're going to be in communication with you. They're going to have a quick turnaround time. They're going to thank you for the opportunity. Like it'll feel like you're already working together, even though it's just a test run. And so that's, at least from my experience, that's what happened with this mixing engineer. I was like, oh, I'm not even going to move forward with anybody else because this is what I was looking for. This is like everything. So all that to say, test projects also can give you a lot more data than just, oh, they can do this skill really well. It's also important, man. There's nothing more toxic, I think, than working with people you just don't vibe with, who aren't good, who are, have got an ego, or just any of that stuff. Is like, that just slows you down. It's draining. It's like, and you don't want to pay those people. Like, I don't want to I'm already parting with my money, right? Like, I don't want to give it to someone who's like, it's just not fun to work with, So I think that's a really important step. Unless there's anything else you have there, Tyson, we could talk about some like do nots before getting super tactical. Or we already are, but like with the step-by-step guide,
Yeah.
Okay, so some do nots. Yeah, kick us off, man.
Okay. So
because here's the thing. Or sorry, I keep interrupting you, but like to set the stage, like Tyson and I both have outsourced to people, right? But we've also been the people that people have outsourced to. We've been the outsourcee and the outsourcer. Is that the right language?
100%.
Okay, cool. Yep. So I just want to like preface that. So when we're talking about do's and don'ts, we kind of have both lanes to pull from here. So kick us off, Tyson. What are some do nots when it comes to outsourcing and reaching out?
All right. So first thing is, don't have a Yahoo email address. No, I'm kidding. The very first thing, do not, is even though you might seek out somebody like Nathan, who he basically wanted to find a deal. So somebody who's, relatively on the more inexpensive end, still has the chops, but is still coming up. Don't expect that deal forever. Ideally, you should want everybody to win who you're working with. Yes. And a big win is everybody is moving up in their career, in their trajectory of whatever they're trying to achieve, right? So even though I'm working with a mixing engineer who's, charging me $15 per mix, like, I don't expect that to last very long. I expect him to progress and, charge me more over time. And I should be okay with that. And I should accept that, yes, obviously, as he gets more experience, he's going to be able to charge me more, or he or she, whatever.
Yeah.
Want to be inclusive here, even though 99% of mixing engineers are all dudes. It's whatever.
Just out here representing,
Okay, actually, sorry. Quick side note: do you have anybody in your audience who is female?
Yes.
Do you have very many girls?
I do. Yeah. It's still more. It's dominantly guys, but it's actually
like what's the percentage split?
I'd have to look again. I wonder if I could look really quick. I think I could look really quick. Give me one.
It's like on YouTube. Yeah, you should be able to tell.
Yeah. I know that there is
for me, for a little tiny while, I had like 0.4% female.
Okay, yeah.
But right now it's 100% dudes. No women watch my channel
really?
or
It's 100%.
like engage with any of my content. Yeah, it's 100%. It's not even like one. I have that like token female. It's like no.
Nope,
none of them
nobody.
care.
Okay, it's 80-20 for me. 80% male, 20% female.
Yeah. That's better than me for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, they're definitely.
I think it makes sense though. It's like songwriting is somewhat equitable, but the whole like production side is just male dominated. I'm still unsure why.
I mean, I know that they're out there for sure, and I know that in like my song reviews too. Like a lot of female responses in their bedroom producers, they're writing and they're recording and they're trying to do it. But so they're definitely there, but dominantly it's dudes.
Yeah, totally. I mean, my mentor or one of my mentors who is a mastering engineer, like she's a woman. Like
there it is.
So they're definitely out there. And that's the funny thing though. She actually said like when she was first starting, 90% of her projects were female artists who wanted a female mastering engineer.
Get out! Talk about niche,
that was
bro.
her niche. Yeah,
talk about niche. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Good for her. That's cool.
Okay. Anyway, side tangent.
Yeah.
Coming back to the episode here. So the other thing that I would say do not do, and I've experienced this. I think everybody who's ever like tried to dabble in production has experienced this one. So as the artist, do not do this. It is an immediate no from every producer that I know who is worth anything. Don't approach an engineer or producer and say that you're going to blow them up. Because if you have to say that means you don't have the credibility to blow anybody up. Okay? If you have enough credibility to do that, they'll probably look up your Spotify profile and your Instagram and whatever else before they agree to work with you, and they'll know whether you're legit or not, right? So,
oh my goodness.
If and this this ironically happens a lot in the hip hop space. It tends to be very prevalent of some young hip hop artist thinks they're a lot better than they really are, and they will show up and they'll say, hey, like, I don't have any money, but you can work with me and I'm gonna get you more clients because this song's gonna blow up, right? Like, that's just the mentality. And this is the wrong approach for a couple reasons. The first is, like, they're going to be difficult to work with because if they already have an ego the size of a watermelon on their head, like, it's going to be a difficult process because they're not going to respect your decisions as a mixing, mastering, producer, whatever you're doing for them. They're not going to respect that. So as the artist, come in with humility, recognizing that you're reaching out to them for a reason. You're reaching out to them because you either aren't as good at that. You're not as good with, how do I say it? You're not as good at as them with that particular skill. So if you're reaching out to me to master your song, it's because you don't have the same skill as me when it comes to mastering. So there's an obviously reason why you're reaching out. So don't expect that you know more than me about mastering when you're hiring me to master. It just doesn't make sense, right? You should just master your own stuff if it came to that. And so if you're approaching a producer and expecting them to, just work for free because you're going to blow them up and give them credibility,
ride my
like,
coattails.
That's just, yeah. No. It's just that whole mentality doesn't really work ever. So you're going to be difficult to work with. You have the ego, and ultimately, you're probably not going to blow up. I know producers who are willing to take splits on stuff just to, and in lieu of upfront money exchange. And that can work, but don't expect people to do that for you. You can ask them, hey, like, would you be willing to do this? And they might be willing to do it if they think that there's, something there that could result in some, royalty payoff down the road. But again, recognize that is not, that's not the normal case. And also, if you're approaching somebody who's already established, they're definitely not going to do that for you because they already can charge a high fee for their services up front. Taking a risk on somebody by taking royalties is, again, a massively large risk for a producer because they expect 99% of those projects to never go anywhere. I've done this in the past, and I've earned probably $10 total from all the projects that I've worked on for splits. So don't expect that engineers, producers will always do this for you. It can be sometimes worth asking, and especially if you're already semi-established, right? If you have 10,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, so you have some traction, then you're probably going to be able to have better splits, and also they're going to be more willing to do a split with you in the long run. I think
that 100%. And there's that kind of conversation makes me think of this thing called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it's like this. I think we've talked about this offline a little bit. It's like
What's the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Let me tell you, Tyson. Okay, it's a cognitive bias. It's basically this idea where, like, people wrongly overestimate their knowledge or ability in, like, a specific area. So it's kind of this wild thing where the more competent you are, like, the more you actually have the skill in a specific area, the less confident you are. Like, you underestimate your ability, even though you can back it up because you know so much, right? And then on the other side, which is kind of what we're talking about with reaching out to people saying, "I'm going to blow you up," right, or whatever. Like, it swings the other way too, where if you actually don't have the ability in this specific area, you think you're more confident, like you have more confidence, even though you can't back it up. So it's this weird, like, flip pendulum, like, going back and forth that, like. Yeah, you might think if you think that you're going to be able to do something or you crush it in something, it might mean that you're actually not as skilled as you think you are. And on the other hand, it could, again, it's not like a blanket statement, but it's just like a thing that can happen if you are actually really competent at something, like you know a lot about this topic and you can crush it. It's almost like the reverse happens where you feel like you're not as capable. And you only feel that way because of all the experience you have. So you know more of what you don't know, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting, fascinating thing if you're just looking to blow some time and do a Google search on the Dunning-Kruger effect and get lost in
Yeah.
the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I would add to that. It kind of creates this sense of imposter syndrome, right? So like you
Yeah.
feel like an imposter. You're not actually as good as other people perceive you to be at something in particular. So that's a reality of a lot of professionals in any field. So there was an interesting study that was done a while back, and I can't cite it, so take my word for it, I guess. Was that they asked a bunch of professionals, so like doctors, veterinarians, physical therapists, mostly in the medical field because they're easy to reach, and they also have high degrees, like they have doctorates in these various fields, and they asked them like, how many of you feel like an imposter? And it came back 80% of people felt like an imposter at least, I think it was like once a week or something like that. And even if these people who are established, like they've been in their respective careers for decades, and they have
Still feel
these
that.
Tons of degrees for this stuff, and they still feel that way. So it's like, this is very, very true of people just inherently always feel like an imposter of whatever they're trying to do. And especially if you're putting yourself out there as an artist, as a mixing engineer, as a mastering engineer, like recognize that is a normal feeling. Sometimes that feeling is legitimate. You're not actually as good as you think you are. Other times it's illegitimate of, I just know so much that I don't know that I now feel incompetent. And so it's a really tough balance of knowing like where that imposter syndrome is coming from. And that, again, hence the reason why we have mentors and other people that we respect to be able to tell us like, oh yeah, you are doing a good job here. You're not doing a very good job there. And those mentors are by far the best people to have in your life to give you objective feedback.
Yes.
Another interesting study while I'm on the trail of doing studies here. There was an interesting study I heard about. It was by Dr. Kashi. And it was like a meta study. So basically they study other studies. It's kind of a weird field of research. Anyway.
Yeah.
And so he was doing this study though on how many publications somebody had produced. So basically actual academic articles. And he found out that people who had a mentor, so professors or, grad students, people producing academic papers, if they had a mentor, they produced 400 times more publications than people who did not have a mentor.
Amazing.
So this is kind of a side tangent, but I think it's valuable of recognizing the value of mentorship in music. If we extrapolate that over towards the music side and we kind of think about that, so if you're able to produce 400 times more academic articles as a professor if you have a mentor, what do you think that will do for your music? Like how much higher quality do you think your music would be, or how much more music would you potentially create by having a mentor in music?
Yes.
So I think that's another just powerful thing. Outsourcing can be a way to meet those mentors.
Oof. Love that.
Because it's an easy way, like it's a natural relationship. Most people are willing to help you out if you approach them with humility and just be a chill person. Then most people are willing to spend a little extra time with you, help you out, especially if you're trying to learn and like still work your way up in certain skills. Like sometimes it's a really good way to approach a mixing engineer, say, hey, like I'm trying to learn how to mix myself, but I'm not very good yet. So I'm going to pay you specifically to mix my music. And then I eventually want to like take over this part of the process.
Yeah.
And be upfront about them. Most of them are going to be willing to do that. A lot of times people will give you mixed notes or like, oh, hey, your tracks are probably being held back because you did this in the recording process. Probably not ideal for, your actual mix here. And I do that all the time as a mastering engineer too. So if people send me tracks to master, I will almost always not master it the very first time they send them to me, because most of the time it needs adjustments in the mix to get a really good master. So I will always just send it back and say, hey, fix these, 3 to 4 things now, and then send it back to me, and then I'll master it. Because
super cool.
By fixing those things, like one, I'm offering a higher level of service because, they're getting value out of my feedback and my personal opinion rather than just my mastering services. But it's also leveling them up as mixing engineers because they're getting real-time feedback. They're able to adjust before I actually master their song, and ultimately it helps everybody in the process. And so That's just some quick examples of how to like get mentorship, even though that's a small thing. Like that's still a form of mentorship that can really, really help. Because if you consistently do something wrong in your mix, like my one bullet point in one email could potentially change your whole musical career.
Yeah, it could change everything.
Like, it's not going to every time, but it could potentially.
Yeah. But you never know what that feedback could do. Yeah, that's huge.
Exactly. So anyway, that's a long way to say, don't have an ego, don't expect handouts from people you're outsourcing to, and don't approach them with this like massive ego and just say, like, we're going to blow you up. You can ride my coattails on the way up. Because if you already had the skill to blow up, you already would have.
You already had done it. Yes.
So that's a little harsh way of saying it, but I think it's also equally true. Anything to add there, Nathan?
True. No, I think that's it. I think that's it. So we've talked about the do's, the don'ts. I think we need to talk about a subject that gets a lot of artists the heebie-jeebies, but we need to talk about money stuff, right? We got to talk about some money stuff. And it's fascinating why this is so gut churning for a lot of artists. But y'all, if you want to take your stuff seriously, you got to put on your big boy, big girl pants on, like children do. It feels good. Oh, it feels like it should be, but adults, professionals, like figure things out. You just do it. You just do the thing. You just figure it out. If it's uncomfortable, so what? Doesn't matter. We're doing this for a greater cause, right? So you will spend to outsource. You will spend to outsource. Whether, like Tyson was saying, that's a situation where you link up with someone who really believes in you, and you're not saying that you're going to blow them up. And so like they're like, hey, okay, no money up front. Let's collaborate. And you work out a percentage on the back end or something like that. You're still spending because that is still a chunk, right, of revenue that is not going to you, that is going to someone else, right? So you will spend to outsource. I don't know if maybe this is a little off script here, so let me know. But do we want to talk about free? Have we talked about free work? Like in this kind of like, hey, my brother-in-law, he has Logic Pro, and so he's going to mix my stuff for me, and it's free. He's not going to charge me. Do we want to talk about that?
We probably should. We haven't talked about it yet, so yeah.
Okay, well then maybe. Okay, so yeah, so
that
so
belongs
you will.
In this.
What's that?
That belongs in this conversation. So
okay, cool. That's what I was just thinking of. Okay, so you will spend to outsource, and even if you are outsourcing to someone, I don't know, like your brother-in-law or your sister's friend, or I don't know, just someone where you have some sort of contact and they're kind of into this music thing too, and they are into mixing and you're into making songs and they want to mix your songs, they're going to do it for free. I think there's a conversation that we can talk about for a second, but I would still argue you're still spending to outsource because, okay, in that situation, what if your buddy over here is actually not that competent quite yet? They're still getting their reps in. You are spending time with that person. You're spending time going back and forth. You're spending time like you're losing stuff on how good your song could be if you just went to someone, even if who just charged you a little bit. So Tyson, do you want to talk about like free work for a second? I feel like it warrants some sort of little bullet point conversation in this because I know this is a thing. Oh yeah, I've got a buddy who's going to do it for free, or I've got someone who's going to produce for free. Like, and that kind of freaks me out a little bit. So
okay, yeah. So this goes back to there's two ways of viewing this, right? From the provider perspective and also the person like getting the service done for them, right? So the service and the client, or service provider, I should say. Okay, so but I want to back up just one step and just talk about music potential. So if we think we have a song, like it sets the potential here. And if you're listening to this, I'm holding my hands up like showing you how big my fish is. So it's really big, in other words. This is the potential of my song. And then there's a next tier up, and that next tier is the recording of the potential of your song. So the songwriting sets the potential. The recording then either fulfills that potential or shrinks that potential based on how good the recording is. The recording can't expand the potential of the song. It can only achieve the potential of the song that's already set in the songwriting phase. And each step of the process can either it can't expand. It can either meet that expectation or shrink that expectation of how good that song will do or potential of that song. So if you have a song that is potentially a Billboard Top 100 hit, right, that can generate tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for you on the back end. So if I then go to my buddy who's like kind of sort of a producer to produce it for free, I could take this song that has the potential for producing hundreds of thousands of dollars down to like $10 because the song is then ruined because of the production.
Yes.
Or that could be done in the mixing process too, right? So if I hire somebody, or I should say, get somebody else to do it for free, or hire somebody who's not very good, then all of a sudden it shrinks the potential of my song, and that it takes the potential of that $100,000 paycheck down to $1,000 or even less. And so it's not the cost of I didn't pay very much money to get it mixed. But I paid $99,000 for that mix. In essence, I lost out on that $99,000 that I could have gotten from this song.
Yes.
So that takes, again, some objectivity of knowing how good your song actually is and how well you're going to be able to promote it and how strong your brand is to be able to back it up. But at the same time, like that is the inherent cost that you're losing. And it's hard to know what that number is because obviously you don't know how well your song is going to do before it comes out.
Yes.
So keeping all of that in mind, there is this this hidden cost in every single thing you do. And you need to recognize what that cost actually is. Sometimes it's not the money that you pay out of pocket. It's sometimes the lost potential that you could have had with that song. So that's from the consumer or the client perspective. I want to talk real quick about the provider perspective. So, for example, I'll have some people ask me like, "Oh, how did you become a mastering engineer? Like, I kind of want to like get into like mixing and mastering myself." And so, for those of you who want to pursue that route, I think free work is actually a really powerful tool. So, the very first thing is choose your lane. First of all, choose your specialty and stick to that one specialty at first. It's the easiest way to get started. So, say I'm going to become a mixing engineer, and that's like my thing. I want to be a mixing engineer. So I choose, okay, I'm going to be a mixing engineer. Now go find clients. So go to Reddit forums, go to Facebook groups, go to, Instagram, just start DMing musicians and say, hey, I'm just starting out my career as a mixing engineer. And be upfront, be completely transparent with what you're doing. Own where you're at.
Yes.
And say, don't try to like come in like at, tier 10 when you're at tier 1. Because the thing is, people can raise you up, but people are also going to knock you down. It feels way better for people to raise you up from tier 1 to tier 2 than from tier 10 to tier 2, right?
Yes.
So make sure that you're owning where you're at in the process, and people respect that. People know, like, there were beginners at some time too, if they're further along in their journey than you are. So be honest with where you're at and say, hey, like I'm trying to learn XYZ skill, and I'm trying to just get some iterations under my belt, and I want to get better at this, and I also want to use some stuff for my portfolio. So basically, this is how I would approach free work. I would say, I'm trying to be a mixing engineer. Can you give me some multi-tracks from one of your songs? If it's good, can I use it for my portfolio? And they will say yes or no. Most people will say no. Some people will say yes. If they say yes, then go ahead, do your best, or do the best possible job you can. Give it back to them and say, hey, can I use this for my portfolio? Don't ever use a song in your portfolio they don't have permission to use in your portfolio. That will always come back to haunt you. So please don't do that. But that said, like now all of a sudden they provided you value as the provider or the client to you. Even though you did free work, you're getting something out of it. You're getting a piece for your portfolio. Yes. And by doing free work, you can potentially get a higher level of quality tracks, so like recordings, to then mix so that your mixes actually sound even better than they really, do, I guess, in essence, if you had produced it, because they had, some other professional produce it. So again, they're like raising the level of your portfolio immediately by not charging up front. So, and as the artist, right? So if somebody came to me and was asking like, hey, can I mix your stuff for free? I would consider it if I, had some sort of relationship with them, prior relationship, or they approached me in the right way, but I wouldn't use that mix for my actual release. Sure. I would give them multi-tracks just out of the goodness of my heart, right? That's the way that I would approach it as the artist. And to try to help somebody else out, give them a leg up if they need it or want it. But I'm not going to probably utilize that recording unless it just like blows my mind. Then yeah, of course I will.
Yeah.
But more than likely, they're not at that level. If they were at that level, they would be charging already. So just recognize, own the place where you're at in the process if you're trying to pursue music as a provider, but also, go down this route. Don't start charging right away. Or if you do charge very little and recognize where you're at, because the worst thing that you can do is charge somebody a lot of money and then provide a substandard product, and then your reputation is ruined and the stuff gets around. Like the music industry is really small, and word gets around on who's shady, and that will always bite you in the butt. And it takes 100 great services and one bad one to just totally ruin your career. So anything to add there, Nathan?
No, I think that's just super helpful to remember. So yeah, just like there is a cost to free work. And then too, I think it was really good that you touched on the provider side, because like we're talking about this whole outsourcing thing, maybe someone is listening and they're like, oh yeah, the mixing, the back end, the production, that stuff's my sweet spot. And you can like totally make a living doing that for people. And so maybe if that's, I don't know, let us know if that's something that you would benefit from like a whole episode on. Because, we both have experience in that kind of freelancing side, but I know especially Tyson has a lot of guidance and gems that he could give if that would be helpful. So just be sure to let us know somehow if we could cover a whole episode on that. But I think, so like to keep going, I think that, so the whole money thing is very real. It's part of the conversation. I think even to take this whole music thing seriously, like you have to be willing to part with your money at some point. Like the world is just not designed to be something for nothing. You know what I mean? Like you have to give to get, and it's just the way it is. And so you can think if it helps you can switch your mentality. Oh, I'm not, you change your psychology. I'm losing money. I'm spending money. What if it was like an investment, because that's kind of the reality of songs. I mean, in this whole music industry, like it's crazy. It's like exponential growth. Potentially there could be exponential stuff. It's not linear. Like 1 + 1, like in other spheres of the world or careers, can equal 2. 1 + 1 is 2. It just makes sense. It's binary. It's black and white. In the music industry, it's like 1 + 1 = banana. It's like, what? It's just like, you don't even, it's like it can be all over the place. But that's kind of why I think a stock is a good analogy. It's like, you're buying a stock with this song, and how can you possibly know the return that you would get on this? It depends on a lot of different things, but it can help you to just remember, no, you are investing in yourself, and all the professionals do this. All the professional independent artists do this. Like they know they're treating their songs like an investment. They're treating their craft as worth investing into. And so I've kind of heard another term for this, another analogy is like real estate, like every song that you create, you're like buying a piece of property. And then another song you create, you're buying a piece of property. And you just don't know what's going to happen over time. Like some of those, properties that you buy could be like a big mansion somewhere, and you're getting a nice check, with the streams and all that kind of stuff eventually down the road. Some of them might be just like a shack or somewhere, that like was dilapidated, and there's like nothing really coming from that. But it's okay because you have a portfolio, right? You have a lot of different songs that ideally, you have at least a handful of songs that are out there where the bigger ones are going to make up for the return that you didn't get on the smaller ones, so to speak. Like, I totally believe that is possible. And I think you kind of have to switch into that mentality. And I love the gusto and the confidence of every song is going to be big. I really like that. I think there's something to that. I think that's really cool. The reality is 90% of your tracks are probably not going to blow up like you think they are. And again, that can be okay because you only really need a handful, right? To like be the ones leading the way, that are your mansions, that are your big stocks that just took off, and then they bring people into your ecosystem and they can enjoy your other songs. But I think that's a helpful mental switch that you need to switch into for outsourcing, right? So money stuff, you have to be ready to part with your money. There's a cost to any kind of transaction, any kind of back and forth thing you're doing, even if it seems free, if it's financially free. There's other currencies at play there. To say, right? You could be costing you something else, headache, potential of the song, all that kind of stuff like Tyson talked about. And then making that mental switch to, okay, the song I'm doing is an investment. And that doesn't mean you want to be a goofy investor and just spend an obnoxious amount of money when you don't need to. Like, there's still some like prudence to have there, but to switch into, I take my craft seriously. So I'm gonna spend money here because I believe in my song. I want it to be the best it can be. It deserves to be the best it can be. All that kind of stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah. I don't know if there's anything to add in that conversation, Tyson, before we kind of hit them with the awesome tactical do this, do that, step 1, 2, 3, 4, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that I want to emphasize that Nathan kind of already touched on was that you're investing in your music. You're investing in your songs that will eventually, hopefully, make a return for you. Some of them are going to be massively successful and give you, multiple of whatever you invested initially in it, right? Because I could invest, say, $1,000 into a song today, and that song could hit the Billboard Top 100 and give me, $100,000 back. So that's 100 to 1 return, right? Crazy. Of the amount of money I invested in it. And so these songs have the potential to be incredibly valuable for you down the road. And the thing about songs is like you just don't know which ones those are all the time, right? So you can have an idea of like, oh, this one's going to do better than this other one, but I still don't know what's like really truly going to be a hit. Mm-hmm. And so with that, like keep in mind, like you're investing in this asset and you're investing in this thing that's going to generate revenue for you for years. And it's unrealistic, it's unreasonable that thing would be cheap. So recognize that whether it's time, energy, emotional energy, or outsourcing, so financial investment, to be able to produce this thing that's valuable, it's unlikely it's going to be cheap. So a lot of people, in my experience, they don't expect their songs to ever pay off, and so then they never let them pay off by investing in them.
Oh, that cut deep. Yeah. One more time for the people in the back. You just talk about mentality right there, right? Like, whoa. Yeah. Wait a second. Yeah. That's worth it. Wait, say it again. Even for just me.
I'm going to use an example from my own life. I produced an EP. I knew it wasn't very good, like inside. I never admitted to anybody else I didn't think it was good, right? Like I think it was like amazing. But in my like, heart of hearts, I knew that this EP wasn't that good. And that cut the legs out from the project because I didn't put enough time or energy promoting it. I didn't create any content around it. I didn't even tell my friends that it was coming out because I truly didn't believe in it. And so if you don't believe in something, you're not going to invest in it, and then it's obviously not going to go anywhere. But if you believe it is possible that a song could go somewhere, you will spend the time to put in it, and you'll part with your money, as hard as that is, to then invest in a song that you know is going to ultimately pay off. So, and it creates this like some ways of forcing yourself to be invested in something is to spend money on it. For example, if I get a free lunch from somebody, I might eat it and, I'll eat half of it, but I'm not going to feel bad though if I throw half of it away because I didn't pay anything for it, right? It was a low cost. Versus if I went out and I bought a, $700 dinner. Like I went to the most expensive restaurant I possibly could, and I bought the most expensive thing on the menu, and then I ordered the, highest quality bottle of wine I could to eat for lunch. You had better bet that I'm going to drink every single drop of that wine and eat every single, speck of food that hits my plate because I spent a lot of money on it. That is the same level of commitment, right, that you have towards your music. So if you spend money on it, you're going to take it further because it forces you to shift your mentality about how you're treating your music. Yes. So this is a completely underlying example of like why you should be outsourcing and why you should be willing to spend money on your music, even if it's not on the front end, even if it's not producing it, spending money on promotion or advertising or something like that, right? That can still be the shift, make that same shift in your mindset around how you're treating your music and treating it like an investment, treating it like a business, and ultimately, hopefully, you can get a return on that. Again. Not every song's going to pan out. Some you'll break even, some you'll lose money. But it's usually that 10% or less even of songs that ultimately just blow up, and you're able to get multiple 10x, 100x, 1000x return on your initial investment. So the last thing I want to mention here, and maybe this will come into hit you a little different, it's the same exact point of, it's unreasonable to get something valuable for a very low cost. And so this is actually an example that I learned from a guy named Dan Henry. If you want to go look him up, he's kind of an interesting guy. But anyway, so he likes to, he's a marketer, right? And so he likes to use this example of a Ferrari though. So if I have a Ferrari and I tell you, I'm going to sell this Ferrari to you for $15,000. And it's like a 2019, relatively new Ferrari, mint condition. If I say I'm going to sell it to you for 15 grand, what do you think? Like, what's your initial gut reaction?
It's like, what's wrong with it?
Yeah, what's
like,
wrong
what's
with the
broken?
Ferrari? Like,
Yeah.
why are you giving me this, $700,000 car for 15 grand? Like, that doesn't make sense. And the reality is, like, and that's the mentality, right? That is inherently given to you by not spending money on your music, is that you now don't think that your music is valuable enough to spend money on it, so you don't think it's valuable, period.
Yeah.
Versus if I told you, like, hey, I'm going to give you this Ferrari for 600 grand, it's worth 700 grand, you're like, okay, it's a good deal, and it's still valuable, and I don't assume that there's something wrong with it. So if you underprice yourself in terms of investing in your music, then others are inherently going to feel that from your brand and your content and the way that you treat your own song. Because if you're not your own biggest fan, then nobody else is going to be.
100%. And I think real quick too, a point to say here is, I'm sure somebody is saying, what if I don't have money? What if I don't have money? And I want to be, sensitive to, everyone has a different situation. So obviously, there's extreme examples, or maybe you don't. Okay. And there's other ways that you can do this. There's other ways that you can do this, like the, nothing up front, things in the back end. There's other ways that you can still do this if that's actually your situation. And I'm not trying to be, not insensitive, but I kind of think if you're saying that, you're the broad percentage of people listening, you probably do. You can probably figure it out. It's just going to come down to lifestyle choices. And you know what I mean? It's kind of hard. It would be difficult, for example, if someone was saying, I just don't have money to spend for mixing and mastering for my songs. But if we looked at, hey, where are you spending your money? And it's like, oh, okay, wow, okay, $250 a month on eating out. Okay. And it's all Chick-fil-A. Wow. Or something. It's like, oh, okay, well, you do have the money. It's just, it's in another place right now. You're kind of prioritizing and you value that thing, right? Yeah. So in a sense, right, what we spend money on is what we value. It says a lot about us. So I would challenge you, fellow songmaker, if you want to get into outsourcing and you're saying you don't have the money, maybe that's actually true. And there's other ways that you can do this. That's really true. There's other ways you can do this. Or look at yourself in the mirror and be like, oh yeah, if I just allocated money over here, then I could actually do this outsourcing thing. So just something, food for thought. Yeah,
absolutely. Everybody is spending money, and I think allocating it appropriately for your actual values. So if somebody says they're serious about becoming an artist, but they're not willing to invest thousands of dollars into it, you're probably not that serious about it.
Yeah,
you're more serious about eating out at that point.
Yeah.
So,
and it's like, hey, that's cool. If that's it, but own it if that's it. Don't be saying, oh, I just can't afford, when it's like, yeah, Chick-fil-A, you're the gold status or whatever in their app, or whatever.
Yeah. So just own that. And then also just, have that hard conversation in the mirror. I'm kind of not pulling the punches like Nathan did a little bit, but the reason is because I was that person. I said I was serious about it, but I really wasn't, because 100%. I wasn't prioritizing that in my budget. And so there's some reality behind that. So time and money are the two resources that we have, essentially. And so if we're not spending enough time or we're not spending enough money, we probably aren't that serious about achieving that goal. And again, it might come back to belief about what is possible. So the last thing I want to say before we go into the tactical how-to to find a provider for yourself is, if you are willing to spend money, and 99% of artists are not willing to spend money, you're going to be in the top 1% automatically. So it's very easy to achieve a tremendous amount of success as an artist if you're simply willing to do slightly more than everybody else. If you put in one more hour a week, if you spend a couple $100 a month extra on your music, then you're going to be ahead of everybody else who doesn't. So that's just one small area and encouragement to truly invest in yourself, invest in your music, invest in your skills, and ultimately you're going to be miles ahead of any other artist who doesn't do those same actions. If you're struggling to get that industry standard quality for your mixes, then go ahead and check out my book, The Objective Mix. It teaches you the objective standards of how to get an industry standard quality mix. There's a link in the description if you are interested in that. Let's get back to the video. Let's move on to tactical how-to. This episode is already getting really long, but we want to make sure we cover this for you of how to find a provider. What are the steps to find a provider? Nathan, take it away.
Let's go. Here we go. Ready? If you need to rewind this, pen and pencil, whatever you got to do. Step one, you need to find these people, right? You need to find a mixing engineer, find a producer, right? So I can speak from my own experience that I just went through. What did I do? Well, I turned to, I found my mixing engineer on a Beat platform. It was kind of like BeatStars, similar to BeatStars. I forget the name right now, Beatmonster maybe. And I used that's cool. This is kind of a little hack. You can use sites like that, BeatStars or whatever, or Music Loop, places where producers and mixing engineers can post samples and stuff, is you can sort. You can use the search function and you can categorize by style of music, by mood, by feeling. And I just did that. I just thought about the kind of music I make, the kind of music I'm looking for someone to jump in on, to help me with my process, my fellow Avenger, right? And I can use that to filter through. And I just kind of sorted through some of the tracks that were there until I found one that hit me. And then I dug a little deeper into that person's portfolio. So there's step number 2, right? And to kind of backtrack, I found my producer via YouTube. Very similar thing. People are posting type beats. So if there's an artist that you like, you could look up, Ariana Grande type beat. And maybe there's someone out there who's just producing and making stuff. And you can kind of same approach. So once you find the person, then it's coming down to looking at their portfolio. If the person does not have a portfolio, I don't want to say, don't, but I would caution you, if there's nothing out there to demonstrate what they can do, could mean a few things. They're super duper new, maybe too new for you right now, and if you're looking for someone new, that's cool, but there's also such thing as too new, right? To where they're not going to be able to accomplish the things that you want. And it also might mean that they're not as committed. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just a big thing that I was looking for was a big portfolio. Because I'm kind of looking for someone who really is out here about this thing, and so that can be a big sign if there's a lot of tracks created, if there's a lot of mix examples to look through or whatever, that can have some credence too, because it's like, oh, okay, not only do you do this thing, but you're serious enough about it that you've done more than 10 or you've done more than whatever, you know what I mean? So finding someone, using search tools, narrowing it down, checking out their portfolio. After that, we begin the reaching out process. Okay, I'll cover this, and maybe Tyson, if you want to jump in. At this point, this is what I did, and I would caution you. Or I'll back up a second. This is what I did when reaching out to people. Use specifics. Okay, so when you're about to reach out to someone, like I found my mixing engineer on that beat place, and I saw all the stuff, and I found him on Instagram. Most of my connecting and networking is for my producer, mixing engineer, was through Instagram. So Instagram DMs, awesome place to do this stuff. I reached out, I sent a message, and all I said, it was nothing. I did not open the conversation saying, I'm looking for a mixing engineer, you down? Fire emoji, sword emoji, whatever. It was not that, right? It's that whole thing. I'm going to blow you up. Hey, you ready for a ride? It's none of that. I literally just asked, hey, just came across, use specifics, came across your beat. And I said the title of the beat. And I loved how you did this. I was specific about what moved me, right? I loved how you did this with the drums and the texture of the synth and guitar or whatever. It was so cool. How long have you been making music? I'm not even asking anything. I'm not talking about, hey, can you do this for me? Hey, I'm looking for someone to collaborate. I'm looking for all this stuff. I'm just starting a conversation with the fellow person in this music space to see if we connect, right? That's my biggest tip when reaching out. Use specifics. Show them a little bit of love, right? We all love our artists. We all love people saying that our stuff sounds good, right? So show them a little bit of love because you mean it. Give specific examples and then just start a conversation. Start a relationship. Don't jump straight to, you want to collab? I'm looking for a mixing engineer. You just talk. So then he told me how long he'd been making music. And I was like, oh, no way. And he asked how long I had. And I was like, oh, I've been making it for this long. And I was like, how long have you been mixing? Like this stuff. I said, do you mix all of your stuff? And he was like, Yeah, and I was like, wow, it sounds so good. Like, it sounds really professional. And it's just a conversation like that. What DAW do you use? What's your favorite plugin right now? And we're just nerding out. We're just hanging out, you know? Then that's a good time to bring up a test project. I think that warrants it. And in some cases, they might even bring it up because you're just being casual and you're just talking and you're just getting along. They might say, hey, would you want to try to do something together, you know? And they might open the door for you. So that's kind of, I feel like, the first half of the tactical how to actually do this, step 1, step 2, step 3, right? Find them, check out the portfolio, reach out in a genuine way, using specifics, giving them some love, and just starting a relationship. Relationship first, not transaction. Relationship first. It's another fellow musician, right? And you want to get along. Then you have a chance to open the door for a test project. I'm going to let Tyson take this the rest of the way.
Yeah. So,
what do you think?
One caveat with that whole conversational part of it, I think it's really good, especially for hiring even mixing engineers, producers, songwriters, and anybody who's like super involved in the creative side. Is more important to have that like really close, tight knit relationship and make sure you vibe well, just like as people, before you even move on to like the music side of things. So that's incredibly important, and I definitely agree with everything that Nathan said. The one caveat I would say is that the further along you get in the process, the less that relationship matters, because the first part of it is songwriting, very personal. You want to make sure that you get along with the person really well before you invite them to write songs with you, versus if you're on the other end and you're just hiring a mastering engineer. Like, mastering is pretty objective. Like, there's a good master, there's a bad master, and I don't need to know the specifics of what your song is about to master it well, right? So there's less of that relationship that matters in the service itself. And so I would say that you don't necessarily need to start a conversation with your mastering engineer, while I would say it's a good indicator if your mastering engineer is like, actually a real human, because sometimes mastering engineers tend to be like a little bit robotic and they never talk to people. And so if you can't get your mastering engineer on the phone, I would probably recommend not hiring them, because if there are issues with the master, you won't be able to communicate with them. But all that being said, you don't need a super like bromance with your mastering engineer to get a good mastering engineer to master your song. So all that to say, there's kind of a sliding scale here. The more objective the service they're going to be providing you, so mixing, mastering is on kind of this other end, where it's very objective. You don't need as close of a relationship, versus production, songwriting, anything like that. Very intimate, very personal, very close to the creative core of your project. Yeah. I would say that relationship becomes more and more important. But the overall like thing or idea here is like, be chill, be cool. Don't just treat them as a service provider. Treat them as a real human, and you're going to get way further on your project. Okay, with that, moving on to the next step of the process. So we've already reached out to them after reviewing their portfolio. We use specifics on how we actually research them and complement them in specific ways, and then we start that conversation. And then once you've had that conversation, it'll be pretty obvious whether you want to work together or not. And you express desire from both ends that you actually want to do a test project, right? And move on to that step of the process. Okay. Now that you have agreed to a test project, what you want to do here is put your best foot forward. You want to give them, if you're the person outsourcing to somebody else, right? You want to give them your best material to work with. So your best tracks if they're a mixing engineer, your best mix if you're hiring a mastering engineer. You want to test it out with the highest quality stuff possible, because this is going to reciprocate that same level of effort and quality from the other person, because you want to see, basically what their potential is, and not just throw them like kind of crappy tracks and you're like, oh, it's like, okay, whatever. And then they're going to treat it with the same type of mentality. They're going to be like, oh yeah, this guy gave me some tracks, like whatever, right? You don't want them to be treating your tracks like that. So you want to do a legitimate test project as if you were going to do something all the way, right? If this is like your song baby, that is the best song baby you've ever had, and you want to make sure that grows up to be a good, strong adult song, then you want to make sure that you're, giving them the best you have. Okay, treat it like that. Okay, so
for that point, really quick too, before we move on, just like two quick real life examples. What just happened to me for the mixing engineer, putting my best foot forward. It was this is a little ninja hack too. If you're a little hesitant about outsourcing that part, I on purpose chose my favorite mix that I've ever done. It happened to be on my favorite song that I've ever done too, but like that was kind of a bonus. But I chose the mix I was most proud of. I was like, oh, I love how this sounds. I was so proud of myself. That's the track that I sent my mixing engineer. And I sent it to him without a reference. I did not give him my finished, mixed, mastered version. I sent him the raw tracks, all plugins removed. I gave him those stems because I knew, okay, if he can at least get it to at least compete with mine, like sonically, I was going to be like, okay, I mean, that's pretty cool. You know what I mean? Or if it was going to be a lot worse or something, it's basically pitting my best, even though mixing and mastering is not my specialty. It's my best effort, right? I need to at least make sure who I'm outsourcing to can match that or has the ability to exceed that, right? In my mind, that's what I was thinking. Sure enough, he did. He sent it back without a reference. He placed things in just about the same spot that I did. And I was like, wow, we have similar instincts. That's very, very cool. Then with my producer, when we were connecting, talking about putting your best foot forward and you kind of teach people how to treat you, you know, like when we collabed, he sent me a beat, right? And then within 48 hours, sent him the full song, top to bottom, lyrics, melodies, fully recorded vocals, everything. I changed the arrangement. I was like, hey, here's what I did with it. He, within 24 hours, sent me back another, he like produced it, helped the arrangement, did vocal production, did even more stuff to it within 24 hours, sent it back to me. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. So then I hit him back within 24 hours. And it was just like this thing back and forth of we were really showing and displaying to each other our behavior and how we actually get after it. You know what I mean? And I think that was really important to, especially if it's important to you, to look for someone who's going to meet you and match your energy or match your vibe. If that's important, especially on a, like Tyson said, on a producer level, that's a pretty intimate creative relationship. So just the fact that it worked like that was even more data on top of the skills being there. The work ethic was there, the good personality was there, the willingness to get after it, the belief in the project, you know. So like just on a tactical level, this is I think, underrated step. Like, yes, you are outsourcing, and at the end of the day, they're responsible for the actual doing of this process that you're paying them for. But I think there's also something to be said for like just doing your very best, give them the best stems you can and like communicate with them and, you know, all that kind of stuff I think is a little, it's underrated, I think, but that's a big key in really connecting with someone, you know? So I just had to say that really quick. Forward!
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I think that, again, we're coming back to this idea of how you treat other people is generally the way that they're going to treat you. So put your best foot forward so they put their best foot forward. And also, a side note is that I can tell with a high degree of certainty who's going to be successful in music based on how they communicate with other people. If you're going to communicate quickly, if you return emails quickly, not like 5 minutes, we're talking within a day or so. But if you are going to make decisions quickly, return those projects quickly, turn around whatever service you're doing quickly, if you're going to write songs quickly for other people, right, you're going to be more successful because you're getting more done in less time.
Yes.
And the other side of that is that you also need to do the same exact thing for a long time to be able to be good at it, to then ultimately, have success. And so those two aspects of time are kind of critical for people's success, especially as an artist, because artists are not generally good with time. But if you just nail those two things, so any decision you need to make it quickly, and make sure that you're communicating with other people quickly to move projects along. And then number two is do something for a long time before quitting. So don't start an artist project and then put out one album and then be like, and then move on. You're never going to be successful that way, right?
No
so
way.
You need to be consistent for years to be able to actually move your career forward. So that was a quick little side tangent, but I think it's applicable here, right? Treating other people the way that you expect to be treated. And also, like, if somebody doesn't hold up their end of the bargain, like, maybe don't work with them. Just because you hired them once does not mean you need to hire them again. And that's the reality of how the free market works. So
Yes.
utilize that to your advantage. So if you don't like working with somebody, don't work with them. It's pretty simple. Some people get this
Straight
like
up.
weird mentality though after they've hired somebody. They're like, but they're my mixing engineer and I have to use them. It's like, no, it's
no,
fine.
you could change
Some
it,
people
yeah.
use me for mastering for one song and I never hear from them again. It's like, all right, that's fine.
Fair enough, yeah.
They must have found somebody else or decided I was too expensive, and that's fine. Like I don't have any hard feelings towards them. Like as long as they didn't, give me a song, I do all this work for them, and then they never pay me. Like then I'm a little upset about that. But
Yeah, fair enough.
if we had an agreement, right, that they were gonna, pay me, but not that that's ever happened to me. I've never done that.
No, that doesn't sound like firsthand experience. Yeah.
So the one question here that rises like if somebody doesn't treat you well, do you give them feedback? And I have a quick story is that I had a friend who was a drummer. I hired him. He actually did it for free. But so it was kind of like this test project mentality of drumming on my EP for me. Okay. So I had him come into the studio. He recorded the drums for the EP. And then it ended up he didn't practice the songs. He didn't learn the songs. Like he had no clue what he was doing before he stepped into the studio. And he was like learning on the fly, trying to record this stuff. If you've ever been part of a recording process, especially drums, this is very, very bad. Don't do this to other people.
Yes.
Show up with your A game. And so because of this, though, I didn't give him any feedback. I didn't ever tell him like, yeah, I was really disappointed with, how you basically treated me and my producer in this process. And it ultimately ruined that relationship. I never had like, he was like my buddy. He could have been a really good friend, but it ended up, we kind of drifted apart because of that, because I was too, chicken to actually face up and actually tell him the hard truth of like, I didn't appreciate this. And the same thing is like, as a provider, like I want to hear negative feedback. And that might sound weird, but it's like, I want to know where I failed people. If they weren't satisfied with how I communicated, if they didn't like my mix or master, if they didn't like, XYZ, like I want to know that so then I can improve myself. People who are willing to take your feedback and implement it are people you want to stick around with long term. Yeah. And that's just a good indication of like future success or future future services that they can provide you. Are expected to increase in value over time. So, again, that kind of comes back to like people and finding the right relationships to invest in to then move your career forward in music, and outsourcing to the right people can mean you're successful or you're not in music. It's that critical to find the right people to work with. So like I was lucky to find Nathan, that he was willing to do this podcast with me, and he turned out to be a super cool guy. Like we barely knew each other before we started this podcast, but it worked out. It worked out well because like I had seen some of his stuff. I saw the way he interacted with other people. I saw his willingness to give to others value, like help people out without necessarily asking for anything in return. Like those are qualities that I value, and that's why I reached out to Nathan to begin with to do this podcast with me. So if you enjoyed anything from this podcast, like take that lesson away and recognize that the way that you're treating other people are going to reflect back to you. And I said this was going to be a super fast point, but it really wasn't.
I think we thought this whole episode was going to be super fast. And we're like, pretty good.
All right. Anything, Nathan, did you want to add on to that before we wrap up?
No, I think I think it's a really helpful point to know. It's just as valuable to know how to handle going forward if it turns out to be really well, and this does want to be the person you want to enlist to outsource things to. And it's also valuable to know what not to do, right? And there's just a way that you can communicate that I love that, where it's not about you. You've no idea if you can gracefully deliver some just, what's the phrase, constructive criticism or whatever. Like that could actually help that person forever. They could change everything. And I think that's just as valuable. And then, it just is like, kind of just some 101 ground rules stuff. If it's a yes and you're going forward with the relationship, things like, service-based stuff that's more like mixing, mastering, those kind of things. You just want to talk. You just want to talk about pricing. You want to talk about fees. You want to talk about just setting expectations going forward with a relationship with a producer. it can get a little more nuanced because it could be some, stuff on the back end to talk about and splitting things and songwriting. And so like all that stuff can be a little overwhelming. But it's important to not shove that under the carpet, to talk about these things, the things that we don't want to talk about, the pricing, the splits, the whatever. You talk about all that stuff up front. You get it out of the way. And it's a really good idea to have things written down and just like do the grown up things where this isn't what we want to do as artists. We don't want to be doing paperwork and filing things and all that kind of stuff. But that's the stuff that's important. I think that's the stuff, especially if this is a relationship that you want to build, well, then you treat it like a relationship you want to build, right? So you're going to do the things and the relationships that prosper, whether it's like a marriage or not, just good relationships prosper when you have an ability to do the hard things, right, together, or do things that are uncomfortable and overcome those things. So I just think it's important to handle all that. And if you're with someone, it goes really well. And then you start talking about all this stuff and they just want nothing to do with it. Maybe they're, I don't know, this might sound a little harsh, but maybe they're just not mature enough yet to kind of be the person you're outsourcing stuff to. There's like, I don't want to talk about that. Pay me whatever. I don't know. It's like, well, maybe their skill set's there, but maybe the business savviness isn't quite there too. And I think there's something to be said for that. So those would be my closing remarks. And if it'd be helpful to go into an episode talking about the whole back end of things and clerical side of stuff, let us know. And we'd be happy to cover it. But that's definitely a whole other beast.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, anything else you have? It's on your mind, Tyson? Or
no, I would just say, yeah. If anything in this episode sparked an idea of like, I would want to know more about that aspect of outsourcing, or even as a provider, like what that is like, what the back end stuff should look like, how to actually fulfill projects, anything along those lines, then let us know in a review. Just leave a quick review for us, how you enjoyed the episode, and then also any questions you might have for future episodes, because we love feedback and we would love to. Speaking of constructive criticism, we're happy to receive it because we want to make this podcast as successful as possible to benefit you. And our level of success is how much it benefits you. So if we're not successful, then you're not successful. So that's kind of the whole point right here. We're not just making this in our respective bedrooms alone to just be able to talk about this stuff in an echo chamber, right? We want to have a full conversation here. So go ahead and leave us a review and what you want us to talk about next in future episodes, because we will definitely 100% prioritize those ideas for future. And then the last thing is Nathan created this super cool guide for you if you're struggling with creating and finishing songs. So if you have a bunch of songs on your hard drive that are just sitting there and you would love to be able to actually put them out into the world, share your song babies, let them grow up to be big, strong song adults and actually go out and do stuff in the world and earn you money, right? So all those investments in those song babies are going to end up with big song adults that then pay you paychecks forever for the rest of your life. If you want that, then Nathan created a super cool guide. It's called the Finished Songs Guide, right? And you can go get that at finishssongsguide.com. So finishssongsguide.com. All right. Thanks for watching and listening to this episode. Apologies, it was so long, but I also hope it was super valuable for you, because this is a really nuanced conversation. You can get really deep into the mindset and the just, how you approach life can really impact your success in music. But I also think that stuff is ultimately the stuff that's really going to give you real results down the road. So again, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we will see you next time on the Prolific Super Producer Podcast.